Good evening. Welcome to the City of Burbank Infrastructure Oversight Board meeting, June 27th, 2024. Can we start with the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you for that. Moving on to roll call.
Okay. Maria Coronado?
Here.
Thank you. Linda Besson?
Here.
Thank you. Jean Schonberger?
Here.
Colin Hoffmeister?
Yes, here.
Shane Weber?
Here.
Perfect. And Shank Kodaverdian and Armin Avazian are absent today.
Thank you for that. Do we have any announcements from staff?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you, board members. Like we typically do, I just wanted to make everybody aware we will go dark in July, so we can enjoy a little summer vacation, come back in August, and obviously at the end of the meeting, we'll announce that date and time, and we will have a good agenda for you to start off our new kind of fiscal year with the board. And that's it.
Great, thank you. We appreciate the break. Do we have anyone for public comment?
We do not at this time.
All right, moving on to our consent calendar. We have a couple of months of minutes to approve since we did not approve our minutes at the last meeting. Should we do them? I think we should do them separately, right?
Yes, I agree.
So let's start with the April minutes. Do we have any recommendations or motions?
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the April minutes.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Do we need to call for a vote?
We'll do roll call. Okay. All right. Maria Coronado?
Yes.
Linda Besson?
Yes.
Jean Schomburger?
Yes.
And Colin Hoffmeister?
Yes.
And Shane Weber.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to May 15th meeting minutes. Any comments or recommendations?
I'd just like to comment that on behalf of all the board, to say thank you to staff for such a wonderful experience. Very educational, very interesting, wonderful to meet all the different people working for our city, doing all these amazing things to make our city better. I know that everyone really enjoyed it, so we appreciate the work that went into that.
Great, sorry to have missed it. All right, do we have a motion or any recommendations or changes?
I'll go ahead and make a motion on this one, too.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, and echoing Linda's appreciation comments.
Great, calling for the roll.
Maria Coronado?
Yes.
Linda Besson?
Yes.
Jean Schomburger?
Yes.
Colin Hoffmeister?
Yes.
And Shane Weber.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and as always, we appreciate staff's hard work. Moving to our Media District Specific Plan update.
Yes.
Take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. It's our pleasure to bring forward our friends from Community Development, and I'll have them introduce themselves when they come up. The Media District Specific Plan is one of 4 that staff is working on, and it's an excellent opportunity for you to hear about what is in store and potentially provide any comments that you would like for staff. Team?
All right. Sorry, I'm a little tall. Good evening, board members. My name is Robert Keating, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department's Planning Division and team member of the Media District Specific Plan Update. Our team has come before this board previously in January. Oops, wrong slide. There we are. Our team has come before this board previously in January of 2023 to provide general information about the purpose and intent of this project. Tonight, I'll be providing the board with an overview of the complete administrative draft of the Media District Specific Plan, and we'll be asking the board for some general feedback about how the plan can further support its goals to emphasize contextual development, encourage transit-oriented growth, and facilitate streamlined housing production. We are currently in the plan refinement and consideration stages of the project with one more planned public workshop. The last workshop took place on June 5th at a meeting room in the Buena Vista Library and introduced the plan to the public. The next workshop will be a virtual meeting tentatively scheduled for August 15th and is intended to solicit more comprehensive comments from the public after they have had a chance to more thoroughly review the draft plan. The Media District Specific Plan Update contains 8 chapters followed by appendices. The 8 chapters are currently available and the appendices will be released with the final draft. The first 2 chapters are the executive summary and introduction. Chapter 1, the executive summary, provides a guide on how to use the document from the perspective of a community member, property owner, or developer, and as someone that works for the City of Burbank. Chapter 2, the introduction, describes the purpose of the specific plan and provides the overall vision of the media district and clarifies the overall goals of the specific plan, which are to emphasize contextual development, encourage transit-oriented growth, and facilitate streamlined housing production. Chapter 3, Outreach, describes the various outreach efforts and tools and materials used to engage with the city residents, business owners, and other stakeholders. Highlights from the chapter are the descriptions of the extensive outreach efforts over the past 2 years, including 17 presentations about the ongoing planning effort, including walking tours, listening sessions, neighborhood meetings, community workshops, both virtual and in person, stakeholder briefings, lectures to UCLA graduate students, and presentations to the City Council, Planning Commission, and other city boards and commissions. As previously mentioned, the project team's engagement efforts are ongoing with at least one more workshop and over a dozen more presentations to cities, boards, and commissions planned for this summer and early fall. The project team will use the feedback to ensure the final plan is updated and represents a well-balanced set of policies and development standards that emphasize contextual development, encourages transit-oriented growth, and facilitates streamlined housing production. Chapter 4, the Media District Profile and Characteristics, describes the transportation, housing, and economic characteristics of the plan area as compared to the regional context. The chapter also includes relevant city plans and policies that the project team referred to during the drafting of the Media District Specific Plan update. A notable characteristic of the Media District is that it is also a major regional employment center with approximately 69,000 jobs within its boundaries, which represents a significant jobs to housing imbalance, resulting in a heavy inflow of around 67,400 people commuting into the district for work, compared to only 2,600 people commuting out of the district. This emphasizes one of the reasons for the Media District Specific Plan update effort, which is to address this jobs to housing imbalance and subsequent traffic impacts by facilitating the development of housing closest to where the jobs and transportation resources are. Chapter 5, the Land Use and Urban Form chapter, contains the objective development standards intended to support the goals of the Media District Specific Plan update. The chapter also contains an updated comprehensive land use table with definitions. The land use table includes new uses and modifications to the permissibility of some existing uses in response to the feedback received from residents, business owners, and the changing business practices. The chapter also sets forth the regulations for the existing transfer of development rights process to allow landowners to sell development rights to other interested parties who can then use them at designated locations in the core of the district away from low-density residential neighborhoods. Chapter 6, the Mobility chapter, contains the strategies and supportive policies necessary to facilitate a safe and efficient multimodal transportation system to support the future development of the Media District. The project team heard from many residents, business owners, and developers about pedestrian safety, concerns about traffic congestion, and a lack of reliable public transportation options. In response, the Mobility chapter establishes goals to create a multimodal, active, engaged, human-oriented streetscape network, support future development that creates greater access to alternate modes of transportation, improve safety for all modes of transportation, and ensure efficient parking management in the Media District. In support of the goals, the chapter includes specific standards for mobility infrastructure, transportation demand management, or TDM, and parking. Because many of the major concerns we heard were related to parking, particularly around the commercial corridor along Riverside Drive, Chapter 6 address these concerns through strategies such as permit parking, priced parking, parking benefit districts, and shared and unbundled parking. Chapter 7, or the Infrastructure chapter, addresses utilities and infrastructure through a discussion of public facilities, water supply, energy, and sewage systems. The infrastructure covered in the chapter includes water, recycled water systems, sewer, stormwater, energy, traffic systems, and telecommunications. Work is ongoing on this chapter, which will culminate in the analysis of existing capacity and potential improvements necessary to city infrastructure to meet future demands. Chapter 8, the Implementation chapter, establishes the strategy necessary to effectively implement the vision and goals of the plan. The chapter specifies which development projects may be approved by right. Development projects that are consistent with the goals, policies, and development standards of the Media District specific plan shall proceed to the appropriate building division application process. All other development projects shall be considered as discretionary projects. Work is ongoing to ensure the final plan includes a comprehensive and realistic implementation plan that will facilitate development consistent with the goals, policies, and development standards of the plan. The project is subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. To fulfill the requirements of CEQA, a Program Environmental Impact Review, or EIR, is currently being prepared. Additional outreach focused on the environmental review and the release of the environmental documents is anticipated to occur throughout the summer. The administrative draft is now available for public review, and the team will be soliciting feedback from the public over this summer and early fall. In addition, the project team will be making presentations to the city's boards and commissions throughout the summer and early fall. The final specific plan will incorporate revisions to the draft plan based on stakeholder feedback and is expected to be ready by fall 2024. Planning Commission and City Council hearings to consider the final plan are expected to take place in winter 2024. Members of the public that are interested in this project are also encouraged to reach out to the city project team listed here on the screen. In addition to phone calls and emails, staff are also available to meet in person with interested people who are not able to participate in any of the planned in-person or virtual events. This concludes the staff presentation, and staff now requests board feedback on how to further support the overarching goals of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Of course.
Do we have any questions?
Please go right ahead.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Being that this was the first update to the Media District Plan since 1991, I thought I would take a look at the map that previously existed of the district and compare it to the map we have now. And it looks like the one thing that changed in terms of the boundaries was the addition of what was known as the Warner Brothers Ranch facilities. I'm curious, in terms of the boundaries of the district, is it really meant to emphasize the studios? because there's a lot of discussion about building housing and developing. So I'm curious, was there any consideration to expanding those boundaries into reaching out into the residential areas that surround the studios?
So I have with me here tonight Amanda Landry, Principal Planner and Project Manager for the Media District Specific Plan Update, who can respond to your question.
Great, thank you.
Hi, good evening. Amanda Landry, Principal Planner with CDD Planning. We did not consider expanding the boundaries of the Media District Specific Plan into the residential areas near it for a couple of reasons. One, those residents haven't expressed any interest in being included in the Media District Specific Plan. And that was made very clear to us, especially by the residents in the Burbank-Toluca Lake area. And there are a couple other planning areas adjacent to the Media District that already have their own planning considerations. For example, there's the Burbank Rancho neighborhood. They have their own regulations and will be going through their own specific plan process in the near future. The studios are within the boundaries of the specific plan area. They're not part of the specific plan, but they're in there because the impact from the traffic from those studios has a significant impact on the rest of the plan area. So we take into consideration the development that's already allowed on those studio properties when we are looking at the rest of the plan area.
Thank you. What I was really looking at was the large residential area along Verdugo, that's kind of east, north and south of Verdugo, and then going east from Hollywood Way, not necessarily Mag Park, but kind of that area between Mag Park and Rancho that's kind of not really defined by a name, because that seems to be the area that would really be affected by the housing and the traffic and all those other considerations and decisions, but they are not really technically part of the district. So that's the reason I just kind of brought that up. Yeah. And then, so the impact on the surrounding neighborhoods. And then incorporating housing, which I appreciate the intention on that. Is it really, again, looking at the district boundaries to get that housing within those boundaries?
Yes, the plan is to try to build or facilitate the development of additional housing within the Media District specific plan boundaries. We have heard from several developers who are interested in doing so. The current regulations that are in place from the 1991 version of the plan do not help facilitate the development of housing. They're older standards that don't really address current contemporary needs. So we've been working closely with them to find a balance between what developers are interested in building and what we can do to ensure contextual compatibility with the surrounding lower density neighborhoods.
Do you anticipate any type of development projects being presented that would, they would say would qualify under SB 35?
So the city of Burbank is subject to SB 35 and any parcel in the city that meets the eligibility criteria. So there are properties that meet those criteria within the district. The hope is that if we develop a set of objective development standards and include them in the specific plan update, developers will choose to build under our regulations rather than going to the more extreme option of submitting an SB 35 application.
Terrific, thank you. And then in terms of transit, looking at, again, the map, we have this Ventura Freeway smack dab in there, so that kind of addresses a lot of the transit questions. But something that you talked about in your presentation was that the residents in the area were looking for more public transportation, more ways of getting around. And I know that the traffic division is part of the planning. When can we anticipate any type of report or presentation or just kind of announcement, development information in terms of what's being envisioned to have this kind of multimodal transportation system?
Yes, so if you take a look at our specific plan, the draft administrative, administrative draft, Chapter 6 on mobility does include quite a bit about future transportation options for the district. It addresses bicycle infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, transit infrastructure, and vehicular infrastructure.
Terrific.
So that information is there. We had a mobility-focused public meeting, a public community meeting, a couple months ago with David Kriske and his staff, and we explained to the public and answered probably about 40 different questions about transit options in the district. So we have that archived on our website, so people can take a look at that again if you'd like to. And as part of our final draft, we're releasing the appendices, and that has quite a bit of information about like the nitty-gritty details of some of the public transportation, like the street cross-sections and things like that. So that'll be available soon.
Wonderful. My last question is, being here in the IOB and we, look every year at the budget and approve projects, do you anticipate any IOB requests in the future coming out of this development and this district plan?
It may be possible. Like we mentioned in our presentation, there is a whole section on infrastructure. Primarily, we've been working with our partners in Public Works and BWP to understand if the city has capacity to address the expected build-out of the plan. So we've been working with them to establish thresholds for improvements to infrastructure. That work is still ongoing a little bit. There's some studies that need to be completed, particularly like sewer studies and some of the water and power studies. So if there are major infrastructure improvements that are needed, that may come before this board. So that might be possible.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Right, and through the chair, Member Besson, the big cooperative effort with CDD and Public Works, as you know, and I've mentioned this before, they work with us and other departments, of course, to set the table with plans. And of course, a specific plan is a major effort. And out of that, as Amanda mentioned, it sets a table for development to come in, and Public Works Engineering is involved in the plan check process, well, conditioning these projects that come in, first of all, for infrastructure improvements. And as we mentioned, the objective standards that are going to be incorporated, with the adoption of this plan and other plans by council, allows us to say, developer, you must do this because it's in our master plan for this plan in the area. Where that comes to staff is, of course, the private development does part of it, but we have opportunities in our capital program to set up our own, working with planning, and Mr. Krisky is to set up the improvements within the public right-of-way as well. Those come to you each and every year in the capital program that we bring to you. So that's where you would see those specific plan elements come to you for design and construction approval for budgeting purposes.
Great. As always, great questions. Before we move on to other questions, I thought I would ask you if someone could give a brief explanation of SB 35 for those that are watching, in case they don't know what that is.
Sure. In a nutshell, SB 35 is a streamlined ministerial review process, which means it doesn't require a public hearing. It's not a discretionary review. It's almost like does it check all the boxes? So if a project comes into the city under the SB 35 regulations, the city is only able to enforce those objective development standards on the books to confirm that they are met for those projects. So if the city doesn't have objective development standards and say only has guidelines, which are not legally enforceable, then the city is really left with not a lot of purview over what the project will look like. There's no way to ensure it meets the contextual compatibility with the community or fulfills the community's vision for what they want their neighborhood to look like. So the city is currently subject to SB 35 because we haven't met our housing production goals in the past. And by doing this effort with the Media District Specific Plan, we're hoping that, again, our objective development standards will be enticing enough for developers to be able to build in a way that is consistent with the vision of our neighborhoods so that we can fulfill our housing production expectations and no longer have to be subject to SB 35.
Great. I knew that would tie it all together. Thank you. Any further questions? Go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to get a little better understanding of the kind of timing of the context and some of the assumptions about number of residents and number of people who work in the district. Yeah. So maybe to just sort of start chronologically, I see your first workshops were in September 2022. When did the plan update begin?
So before we started engaging with the public, we did a lot of background research, including looking at the census population data, California Department of Finance data, and actual sort of boots on the ground patterns. So we started at the beginning of, I'd say, March, April, May of 2022, looking into all those resources. And then we initiated our public outreach after we had enough information to be able to have discussions with the public.
Thank you. So I'm really placing this relative to the pandemic and the changes in work from home, other remote work, people who have left the area to work elsewhere, hybrid, return to work. So I'm trying to sort of date the data
Right.
and the assumptions. So in 2022, what year data are you looking at?
We looked at, because of the considerations of the pandemic, we realized that that would have a significant impact on particularly traffic patterns. So we looked at a lot of 2029 data, and we
Sorry,
have,
which year?
2019. 2019 data for our baseline. And then we've worked with David Kriske and our transportation planners to look at our city's model. And we updated that with more recent traffic counts to get a more accurate representation of what is actually going on.
And you did that update, sorry, when?
We just finished actually updating the traffic model earlier this year.
And are those the figures that you're showing here? So it's still the assumption that 67,000 people are coming into the area every day?
Yes, and what we found is that those travelers are not all coming in at the same time necessarily, but they are coming in to do business in the city of Burbank on a regular basis. So they might be coming in throughout the day, some at typical rush hour, because the studios operate on slightly different schedules than, say, a typical office. They might be coming in off-peak hours.
So that's unique to the media district?
Yeah, studios are very unique operations. It's not like a typical, like the city of Burbank or other large office buildings here. They have very different schedules based on what shows and programming is going on, how many of their sound stages are actually occupied, the complexity of the show. A lot of different factors go into it.
I guess as a neighbor to the media district, and my husband works in the media district, our sense is it's not that busy. And Warner Brothers is not that busy. And the new buildings are not that busy. And people are not coming in. So I mean, that's anecdotal resident, day to day. I would just, like, it doesn't feel like traffic is anything like it was in 2019.
That perception is common. We've seen that. A lot of other people have expressed the same, but we're expecting it to return to similar to pre-pandemic conditions, especially with the new development of the Warner Brothers Ranch lot. They're building, I believe it's 16 new sound stages. They've put quite a big investment in that because they believe it's going to come back. It's hard to believe that someone put $500 million plus into an effort that won't be occupied. So we believe that there will be traffic coming back into the district. And from our outreach and interaction with the studios, they do still have those employees. Some of them are on adjusted schedules, like many other office conditions where people can work from home remotely for a certain amount of days. So we're seeing some impacts of that, but the overall number of jobs in that area is still consistent.
Member Schomburger, if I could follow up with a question. You mentioned you have the nitty-gritty, like, do you have the details of the data from the traffic study in the appendices?
It'll be in the
So it could be
appendices, so
there.
they'll be released with the final version, including all of our traffic counts, which we did during the school year, so we would account for more typical traffic. So that'll be available in there. And then we use city data as well to supplement the individual traffic counts that we completed. So that will all be there for review, and then we have to look at all of that as well, and then the expected data from the build-out in our environmental review. So with our build-out, that also contributes to traffic in terms of VMT, and then locally, we still look at level of service. So we anticipate with that, we plug that into the model as well. So that's going to lead to much more residential traffic and a little bit more non-residential.
And if I may, those counts were from what year?
We did actual counts in 2023,
Okay,
and then the city has counts on a regular basis that we use their most recent counts.
thanks.
Thank you. And It seems like so many projects have already been approved in the media district, the FedEx building, the car wash, the 2 parcels where the post office used to be. Everything else on Moore Park seems to have, turned into housing. What's the incremental expected need beyond what has already been approved?
So we have heard from developers for a few different locations within the media district for projects ranging from 50 to 200 units, and not on those locations that you've already mentioned. And then the expected build out of the plan itself is looking at accommodating up to an additional around 5,000 new units in the media district. And this is because the city of Burbank is obligated, the state has imposed upon us some requirements for housing development. The state has told us, as part of our adopted housing element from 2022, that the city has to accommodate up to 8,872 dwelling units. So through our specific plan efforts, the media district specific plan, downtown TOD specific plan, the Golden State specific plan, and then the forthcoming Rancho specific plan, we're trying to figure out where we can accommodate all of these units. And it's not just the units that were given to us in the 2022 housing element. We have another housing element that will come on into play in 2029, where we expect an equal amount of residential units to be imposed on us. And this is in addition to the City Council's own established goal to try and build up to 12,000 units by 2035. So spread out over all those areas where they have the highest concentrations of possible transit opportunities, we're trying to focus development in those areas so that it's not putting pressures on other corridors that are more adjacent to lower scale neighborhoods. So in this case, if you look in our plan in the land use chapter, number 5, you'll see that of the units that we're planning, we're putting them towards the core of the district, furthest away from the outer edges, where we have heard quite a bit of feedback about the desire for contextual compatibility because of sometimes there's a conflicts between larger mixed-use buildings or larger residential buildings and typical single-family duplex neighborhoods. So.
Thank you. So coming back again to the assumptions and the sort of big picture things that have evolved in the last 5 years or so. So I'm sure you saw in the LA Times, the entertainment industry is on very hard times. People are leaving Los Angeles. I think the quote was, "The audience has moved on." What's the rebound plan that actually supports this number of jobs? Because many parts of entertainment haven't been working for over a year. There's runaway production. Netflix is going to New Mexico. Are we overbuilding for an industry that is no longer really here?
So the media district specific plan doesn't put all its eggs in one basket on the media industry itself. We realize that there's changing business practices. So that's why in our chapter 5, we have amended our land use table to account for a variety of new uses that could be allowed in the media district specific plan. The studios themselves are under plan developments and development agreements, so they're not actually part of the regulations of the media district specific plan because those are solid regulatory documents that we can't touch. They're private agreements between those properties and the city, so they're not part of the specific plan area. So if those properties want to redevelop into something else, then it has to go through a formal process with the city to disentangle it. But the other areas of the media district specific plan, we have looked into accommodating other new uses. We did a lot of research with the business community and even the studios themselves to find out what businesses in the area that they have seen kind of flourish that are part of their support and transitioning to different types of media production. And we're trying to accommodate that and other types of non-residential businesses. So it's not just hinging its hat on the media industry itself. It's called the Media District Specific Plan because that's what this area is formally known as because of its history and it's what it's rooted in. But we're looking towards the future to try to have as much flexibility in the plan as possible to take into account that there may be changes in the economic forecast that we want to be able to respond to rather than having to try and catch up to.
So it seems like baked into these numbers is the number of studio jobs and other jobs within the boundaries of the district. Is that a fair assumption?
No, the assumptions about jobs in the district are not driving the desire for housing. We have demand for housing aside from not related to the studios. Burbank is just a very desirable place to live. And we are proximate to downtown LA, where there's a massive industry of all kinds of non-residential business. And we're also near a lot of other important areas in the Southern California region that have high employment. So Burbank is a desirable place to live. So we're mainly focusing on the development of housing in the Media District specific plan. And because the Media District area has quite a few opportunities for transportation, it's being looked at as a place for future BRT stations. City has our own bus route. It's close to the freeway, and it's also close to a metro station. We want to concentrate housing near where we have those resources so that people can gradually over time transition to using them more than their personal vehicles, and reduce any sort of traffic impacts that might be there, reduce environmental impacts, and then just we believe that transitioning away from cars will help communities in general just be more comfortable for people to live in.
Thank you.
Great questions. Anyone else have questions? Go ahead.
Hi, I just had a question on the Chapter 5, the land use and urban forum. You addressed some of it, so I'm just kind of recalibrating here. The whole issue of selling developmental rights under the TDR, how is that managed, and what kind of oversight is there for that?
So right now in the existing Media District specific plan, there is a process described for the transfer of development rights. It requires a conditional use permit. But aside from simply stating that it requires a conditional use permit, there isn't a lot of structure to that program. There's not a lot of guidelines. There's not a lot of assistance to either developers or staff on how to manage this program. So the only times we've actually seen people use the transfer of development rights is as part of the PD processes, which is a planned development, which is an overlay zone. And they're usually attached with a development agreement with the city that holds both parties to certain development requirements. So in recognition that we had this process with very little guidelines, we wanted to continue to allow that in there, but include additional guidelines to provide structure. So for example, we are structuring, or we have contemplated structuring the TDR program to identify areas where you can sell your development rights and areas where you can receive development rights in order to balance the needs of the community. So the areas where you can sell development rights are going to be the closest to the outer fringes or outer edges of the district that are closer to lower scaled neighborhoods. And where you can receive those development rights are again in the core where we want to focus development. So that's sort of the basis of the new framework that we're considering. And then there will be requirements related to regulating the fees associated with this. We don't want to get too much into the civil issue between the two parties, but we wanted to set up some guardrails to keep it from becoming unfair.
Right. Okay, thank you. And is there a source in this plan that you can look at the maps that will kind of show where you say that, where some of the rights can be transferred to an end user versus the other way around?
So we're soliciting feedback over the summer and early fall to kind of solidify where people want those specific areas to be. We've described generally where we believe they should be, but we're hoping to get a little bit more feedback through this release of the admin draft. And we will put that in as part of our implementation item. It talks about establishing a TDR program that would apply to the Media District and the Golden State area and the Burbank downtown COD area, so they have the same set of regulations. So this will be, the implementation talks about incorporating those maps into that overall process.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. If we don't have any further questions, I have one. Oh, one more? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay, just, I heard you name off the specific plans. Could you name them off for me one more time?
Sure, yeah, there's the Golden State specific plan, which is over by the airport, and then portions of San Fernando. And then there's the downtown Burbank TOD, which is the central district area here, down towards the Metrolink below the 5. And then there's the Media District specific plan. And then there's the forthcoming Burbank Rancho neighborhood specific plan, which is the Rancho neighborhood.
Great, thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So I just wanted to come back to your timeline. So you've got an additional workshop possibly in August and presentations to council and the rest of the boards. What is your target date for approvals and completion and implementation and such?
So we are hoping to get a final product to the council along with its associated environmental document in the winter 2024, so hopefully by this December. That's barring any sort of unexpected delays. Part of that is driven by a desire to comply with our housing element, and part of it is coupled with our requirements from the state who provided grant funding for this project. So we do have some of those pressures to do that, but also we just want to make sure that we do this process sooner rather than later so that when we do get faced with projects coming in through the streamlined ministerial reviews, like the SB 35 projects, we have a set of standards that reflect the city of Burbank's desire for this neighborhood. Because right now, the existing development standards under the existing media district specific plan are largely unenforceable. They're not structured as objective development standards. They're more of guidelines and discussions of vision rather than hard and fast objective development standards. So the city is at risk until we get those new objective development standards online of getting projects that aren't really going to be consistent with what anyone in the neighborhood wants to see. So that's why we're trying to keep as close to our deadline and our expected timeline as possible.
Thank you.
All right. If we don't have any further questions, do you have any comments?
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your presentation and
Thank you.
for staying on top of things for us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you. Good evening.
Definitely a lot of work goes into that, so thank you for studying hard. All right, so we're going to move on to the introduction of additional agenda items. Does anyone have any suggestions that we might add for a future agenda? Go ahead.
I would like to propose an additional agenda item for our next regularly scheduled meeting. In March of 2023, a permit was issued at 677 North Victory Boulevard. That is the Burbank Airport Plaza lot. This lot contains Home Goods, Burger King, Aldi's, and Lancers, among some others. That property has a Tesla supercharger facility at the rear. And my thought about this is that supercharger station fronts onto a residential street while the permit address is 4677 North Victory Place, which is a commercial address. The new frontage on Lomita has resulted in quite a bit of an increase of traffic. People on a website called Tesla Motors Club have also noted that the 677 charger station would be safer if the traffic were to ingress and egress from Victory or Chandler Boulevard rather than the Lomita Street entrance currently. As soon as Q4 of this year, on Tesla's website, it shares that automakers such as Ford, GM, and Rivian will also adopt their charger port, which would greatly expand the usage of the Tesla supercharger station on Lomita Street. The city of Burbank recently installed some speed bumps on the southern half of Lomita, closest to Magnolia. It's unknown if those are installed in response to community input or not. And so to that point, would like to add to our next meeting that staff present a report to the board regarding traffic studies that it conducted before and after the installation of the charging station, if any, and the results of those studies, the installation of the speed bumps on Lomita and whether that or not that was in response to community input, and any other traffic measures or mitigations considered by the city at this time and that the board further discuss the traffic and safety impacts of the supercharger station on Victory Place.
So, Madam Chair, the request is not within the purview of this board, but there is a part, and I'll explain why. There is a part that I do want to bring back because I heard you mention this. We can bring back the speed hump program, and that's a citywide program. The IOB has a small responsibility for traffic program level responsibilities. The Transportation Commission is primarily responsible for all the traffic and transportation programs. Individual property development, and again, I can't say too much because I know my city attorney, if he's hanging out at home, he's saying we're getting too much into the weeds. What I'd like to do is connect you with our traffic engineering manager, and I can do that personally, to talk about any traffic studies on a specific property. And that's for anybody, and anybody listening, of course, if anybody has any questions. But for this group, I really appreciate you bringing up the speed humps, because we have a definite program, and long story short, those are almost always by resident request by a majority of the block. But I'd be happy to bring that item to you in the future for sure.
Sure, thank you, I appreciate that.
All right, thanks.
Great, and if possible, could you email the entire board the results of that, if possible, if they come back with a report?
Clarification, the report on that specific.
On this item that he mentioned, if there's a way that we could just get the information. Or we
Oh,
could-
sure.
Yes.
You're right, okay, can do that.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so we have a couple of pending agenda items.
Oh, Madam Chair, I did have one to add.
Oh, sure, go right
That's a good
ahead.
transition, because I didn't know which part to put it in. But
All right.
for August, we will have the election of a chair and vice chair for the coming year. So that is something that we will have for August, along with, as you see, I'm excited to bring forward to you our facilities small capital improvement and maintenance programs. So that's a first for this body, and we have some exciting things that are going on and things that you'll recognize that you've seen before in the overall capital program. And those are the two that I have coming up for August specifically.
Okay, thank you for those. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? All right, hearing none. It looks like we're moving on to adjournment. We will be dark in July, as most boards and commissions are. So our next scheduled meeting will be August 22nd, 6 p.m., right here. Thank you very much.
Have a great summer.